Welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all-around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self-improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
Welcome, everyone. Jeff, I got to ask you, that intro makes me sound pretty good, right?
You know what? I didn't notice the dating thing before. Are you dating?
No, I'm not. I'll be married 37 years. So,
Okay, so that's interesting. All right.
so I'm not. But you know what? I did have, and this is kind of off topic, but I did have a guest, two sisters, who created an AI-based dating app that's based on a scan of your face. So you don't put in you could, but you don't have to put in a description, a bio, nothing. You just put in your face. AI reads your attributes and matches you up with someone. So
Do they clone you and create one of those AI girlfriends that you're seeing? Well, I see an ad every 3 seconds for an AI girlfriend.
seriously?
I can't even handle a real wife and
You know
girlfriend.
what, Jeff, I don't go to those websites, but
It's not a website. It's on my Facebook page.
really, no, I never
Yeah,
saw that. I never saw that. But
yeah. It's a big thing right now. It's a huge thing.
which is sad. It's another societal defect that people are dating
Yeah.
AI generated
Oh
people.
yeah.
But that leads us to today's topic. So, just as a brief background, we've had a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody on from the Brandeis Center. We're not that far out from the Holocaust, and the things that are going on campus, in the streets of Manhattan, and everywhere else are, as a Jew, extremely disturbing. But really, for anyone who's a human, they should be greatly disturbing. And Jeff Lax is our guest today. Jeff is a professor of law and of business at the Kingsborough Community College. You also are the chair of the business department, correct?
Yeah.
Terrific. And I saw Jeff on cable news, and the topic is very important to me. And I reached out to Jeff, and he was gracious enough to agree to come on the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. And I thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. So you're the grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors.
Yep. And what this generation doesn't realize is, so I need to add it. I never used to, but I need to add it now. What that also means is that my great grandparents were murdered and probably, we don't know for sure, probably gassed to death in the Holocaust. And I add that now. It's painful. I never met them, obviously. It's painful knowing that my ancestry comes from that horror, but it does impose an obligation, I feel, on me to push forward.
You know what? I agree. My relatives as well, Eastern European. We lost several in the Holocaust, and I think as Jews, we become a little more secular in nature, and people are not necessarily drawn to and as anguished by this topic as maybe they should be. But, every day on TV, you see things that should make you think, should make you worry. The phrase "never again" is one that, the Jewish people have always liked to invoke. But it's words, it's rhetoric, it's not true. Because here we are in 2025, and it kind of is again. So now you created or you founded S.A.F.E Campus. And can you tell us a little bit about what S.A.F E Campus is all about? I know it's to fight anti-Semitism on campuses.
Yeah, and our focus, though, our main focus is to fight and advocate for a group that really has not had advocacy, but has been, I think, one of the most, if not the most, discriminated against, harassed groups on campus which is Zionist Jews. Jews who view themselves as Zionists. They have been harassed. They have been subject to discrimination. They've been even assaulted in instances around the nation on campuses and also obviously off campuses. So we know that that's happening. We know that there are chants of Zionism out of CUNY at my campus, at our university. The union itself actually chants that. Union delegates who are supposed to represent us, including the Zionists, they will chant Zionism out of CUNY, which means me out of my university, get me out. So we were formed to protect all Jews and also all protected classes as well. We support them as well, but the main focus, yes, is on advocating for Zionist Jews.
So, what does the mission look like? How do you do that?
Well, we're doing things that nobody else has ever done. And I think that's one of the reasons we've garnered so much support. And we're so grateful for that. We have so many people doing unbelievably high level pro bono work for us in so many different areas because they love our mission so much and because they see it as singularly unique. For example, we have a legal network of over 150 lawyers and we have a smart matching legal system where, let's say you're a student at a college and you're a Jewish student, you walk into class and your professor says, Zionist Jews are genocidal murderers and you're settler colonial, all the anti-Semitic trope lies that are out there. You're a settler colonial, genocidal, apartheid, Zionist Jew. So you're a student, you're going to be, really impacted by that. And you may want legal help and you may feel you're being treated differently. So you can actually go onto our system. You go to safejewish.com, which is connected to from our mysafecampus.org website. But you can go on there at 3:00 in the morning if you want and match with a lawyer. You do a few drop-down boxes, tell your story, and we will match you with a lawyer from our over 150 now lawyer network from your area who knows the area you need for your case. And there is never any cost to you. Every single lawyer in our network has agreed they will either not take the case if it's not relevant, or take it on contingency or pro bono, which means you will never pay a penny as a victim, as a plaintiff.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that brings me to a different question. Certain instances of this anti-Semitism on campus garners a lot of attention. But, my son was getting a PhD at Ohio State, and he said it wasn't really prevalent there. How many, away from the Ivy League, and I suppose it's not all Ivy League schools, but how many campuses is it truly an issue on?
It's on every single campus in America. So he may not know about it. Not knowing about what's going on behind the scenes does not mean it's not happening.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, it's happening on every single campus in America. I'll give you a great example. At my university, at CUNY, nobody would know this. Our group puts out, we have sources everywhere. We have sources. If the administrations in this country knew, especially CUNY, where we have sources, they would be losing their minds, freaking out, because we have the highest level sources in the little tiny crevices of the most important rooms at universities around this country. We get all the information. In fact, we've broken probably the overwhelming majority of local anti-Semitism stories in the media. Wow. As you said, I've been on Fox News a number of times and many other major media outlets. And we also break stories behind the scenes nobody even knows about. And we solve problems behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about. But I'm glad that, he has not experienced anti-Semitism himself. Don't get me wrong. I'm very glad for that. But there's no question there is anti-Semitism. And I can prove it because systemically around the country with DEI itself has been implemented uniformly in an anti-Semitic way. Also, the teachers' unions, they operate in coordination with each other around the country, and they instill anti-Semitism. They are built on anti-Semitism. They are built on anti-Western culture. They're Marxists. These academic these academic union members, the faculty members at the universities, are actual Marxists. I don't say that for dramatic effect. They call each other comrade at their
Really?
meetings. So at our university in New York City, which is 20% Jewish, we put out a report, Safe Campus did, in 2023, that there were not one, not two, not three, zero Jewish members of the senior administration at the City University of
Wow.
New York, CUNY, in a city that is 20% Jewish. How do you walk down the street, Michael, and not fall over a Jew in New York City?
No, it's true. And if it was another, I mean, Jews aren't considered a protective class, I don't believe, but if it was actually a protective class who constituted a certain percentage of the population in your school and you didn't have representation, people would go crazy.
Well, Jews are definitely a protected class. We're protected based on potentially religion, ethnicity, could be nationality if you're Israeli. And if you're a Zionist Jew, that is an ethnic protection. No question about it, either ethnic or religious. Some people believe religiously in Zionism, that it's mentioned in the Bible. So we definitely are protected. And that's one of the biggest problems, actually, is that Jews think sometimes they're not protected because they're not familiar with the law. We absolutely are protected.
It's,
And they should seek out a lawyer if they're not sure.
well, that's good to know. But you say anti-Semitism. So, growing up, I lived on the South Shore of Long Island, but I went to an elementary school that was mostly non-Jewish, and I faced a certain amount of anti-Semitism. But for the most part, anti-Semitism has always kind of traveled below the surface, and now it seems much more acceptedly overt. And if that's the case, and if it's occurring on every college campus, and how do you eradicate it? How is it possible to eradicate it if it's become mainstream?
Yeah, well, that's a very broad question because there are so many different kinds of anti Semitism. So it depends on what you're fighting. The administrations themselves, so again, at my university, the chief diversity officer, the head of discrimination, and we are actually the largest public urban university in the entire country. We have 240,000 students at CUNY. We have 25 campuses. And the most powerful diversity officer, the person in charge of all discrimination at my university, is a woman by the name of Sally Abed Allah. Who is she? She's the former director of CARE Minnesota, which is not just a CARE chapter, but one of the most
Minnesota.
extreme
Sure.
CARE chapters in the country. In fact, CARE Central, which is affiliated with Hamas, which was an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terror financing case in American history, tied to funneling money to Hamas, they even have distanced themselves from CARE Minnesota. So our chief diversity officer is a former director of CARE Minnesota, and she led the BDS movement, the anti-Semitic boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel at her CARE chapter. And she's in charge of anti-Semitism cases at our university.
So now, how did she rise to get that post? Is there no vetting, or like it seems at a lot of schools, anti-Semitism runs through administrations.
You're exactly right. They want somebody like her running the discrimination show at CUNY because they are anti-Semites. So when you ask me the most, the $100,000 question, I guess today with inflation would be the $1 million question, right? Which is, how do you stop this? Well, where
Right.
do I start? Because at my university, the head of discrimination, the person running the whole show, I ask you, what chance does a Jewish student have bringing an anti-Semitism complaint based on Zionism when the head of discrimination is an avowed public anti-Zionist? What chance do they have?
Not too good. Not too
No,
good.
no.
So what does that mean? What if you're I'm older, but I have young kid, not young, but I have kids in their 30s. What's going to be?
Well, we have to speak out, obviously. I think that's starting to happen. I think people are really starting to get what's going on and starting to speak out. We have to really learn which Jewish groups are fighting the real fight, because there are Jewish groups out there that are concerned about power and money, and that's all. And they put on a good face, they pretend they're doing things to fight the fight, but they're actually not doing that. And being really on the ground fighting this, and now being also in the advocacy arena, it's so sad and distressing to see that some Jewish groups are in it really just for the money, the power, the connections, whatever else. So depressing.
Well,
Because all I care about is wiping out anti-Semitism.
right, and I can see that, but being part of I'm the board chair of a combat veteran charity, and many charities, people are in it for money, and it's sad. But let me do this. So there was a recent case 2 days ago at what do you call it? At Princeton, I forgot, where Naftali Bennett was coming to speak, and the anti-Semitism, the hatred, the everything that you associate with this was on display. I saw somebody interviewed who said that. So here's a former prime minister of Israel. He's coming to speak, not in necessarily friendly territory. What this student said is there was no bag check, there was no ID check, and there was no security on duty. So if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to play this quick video. Can you see that?
Yeah.
What we are witnessing here today is the death rattle of an apartheid regime. And every one of the supporters that defended genocide will be forgotten in the dustbins of history.
So basically, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
So, that is so prevalent. The level of hatred, the level of the anger, the emotion. These people, for whatever reason, wherever their hatred comes from, is deep seated and pretty much baked in. So, how does it seems like an extremely uphill battle that we're facing.
Well, these are not real people. It's important to understand what I'm saying is I don't literally mean they're AI.
No, they're paid, they're professionals.
Exactly. Right. And if you look carefully online, if you look for this, you'll see it. There are advertisements. Like the first time you show up at one of these anti-Semitic rallies, you get $250. Second time, $500. Third time, $1,000.
Right.
This happened at Columbia. These people don't have jobs. I mean, they're getting paid. They are paid protesters. So it's important to realize that 99.9% of students still the same today as it was 20 years ago. They want to go to school. They want to get their degree. They want to get a good job. That's it. That's all they care about.
But
these people, yeah.
Well, no, you do have the professionals, whatever organizations are funding them, you have those. But then you have what I call, and other people call, the useful idiots.
Right.
The other students, other professors, people who glom on to whatever the issue du jour is, and they go in hook, line, and sinker. So, I agree that you have your professionals, but you also have these people who are morons who just go along to get along. They want to be part of a group.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. But I think that problem would go away if you cut off the head of the snake. The head of the snake is literally Hamas, is literally the terrorist groups that are working. I mean, there are now court cases, active court cases that have evidence. My friend Mark Goldfeder just brought a case representing the victims, hostage victims' families, 9 of the families who were abducted by Hamas captors. And he has shown, he's been all over the news lately on Fox, on Dr. Phil, on Mark Levin, and he's been showing actual documentation that proves that Hamas actually has a presence on our campuses. Specifically, he's talking about Columbia, but there are others too. And showing, for example, Hamas flyers that say Hamas media office stamped. Hamas's
Right.
media office logo is stamped on the flyers. So Mahmoud Khalid, who is now in the process of being deported and in detention, who was leading this movement at Columbia, his group was handing out literally Hamas literature on the campuses. So when I say cut off the head by the snake, yeah, cutting off Hamas, cutting off the actual terror groups that are working with the people on our campuses. And then the useful idiots that you're talking about will not be brainwashed with propaganda that's not true. That's not just anti Semitic. I don't really want to focus just on anti Semitism. It's anti American. I mean, they also chant death to America. They're anti Western culture. The reason why they shut down bridges and throughways in New York City is because they want American infrastructure taken down. It's not just about Israel. It's certainly not just about Jews. It's about Christians too, and it's about Western culture. They want all that destroyed. And the way you stop that, because where it's coming from is Marxism in these faculty unions and literally the terrorist groups who are sending messages to our campuses. By the way, the hostages, and Mr. Goldfeder talks about this in his case that he just recently brought, the terrorists were telling the hostages, we have operatives on your campuses, and they were showing them pictures. They were showing the terrorists pictures. The terrorists who survived, and thank God the few that came back, were talking about that, how they were being tortured and mocked that we are in your culture. We have people, operatives on your campuses.
Well, for thousands or tens of thousands of years, that's been the MO. You can destroy a society from the inside. No question about it.
Yeah.
So, to backtrack for a second, because I was interested about this question, because, I know people who've worked on college campuses and have been a little bit, I'm not going to say you're a nonconformist, but you operate a little bit out of the norm of professors. You have an agenda that's much different than probably what many of your colleagues consider to be what it is that they do. And I guess that was a convoluted way of asking. How do your colleagues treat you, and how do students treat you?
Well, let me just say first that I am fully committed. I'm a department chair.
Right.
Okay. I have a job, and I take my job very seriously, and I do my job well. And if I didn't, CUNY would have fired me a long time ago.
Right.
They've tried to fire me. They put me under investigation, a torturous 8-month investigation where I wasn't allowed to testify on my own defense, where I wasn't shown a copy of the complaint against me. And and they hired an outside multi-million-dollar multinational firm called Stone Turn to investigate me. Why? They were trying to dig up stuff on me. They had nothing on me because I'm straight as an arrow. I do my job, and my department likes me because I do my job.
But that didn't stop them from doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I am elected to my position as department chair. I'm up for election in a few weeks, and it's a 3-year period. So, yes, I do. I live a different life than some of my colleagues. Definitely. A lot of people are doing the same work I'm doing behind the scenes. We have a vibrant group at Safe Campus, people doing yeoman's work, brave work. Listen, I knew going into this that I was putting my name out there, putting my face out there, and I am so knee deep in it at this point that I've accepted the negatives that come along with it.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. Listen, I have come to peace with the fact that if whatever I suffer, I'm willing to take that heat. Now, I desperately would do anything to keep that from impacting my family, which is why I've bought more life insurance. I hate to be that grim about it, but it is that serious in my mind. So I would hate to see that, but I'm okay that if I am the lightning rod and someone else is not because of that, I'm okay with that. To me, it's the cause that matters. That's the only thing that matters.
You know what? That's a phenomenal attitude. But yeah, I mean, you're doing, they always say you're doing God's work, but you're doing important work.
As long
So
as my wife doesn't see this particular podcast, I'm okay with
what, the life
this.
insurance part?
Yes, what I just said.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I'll keep,
listen, you got to laugh about it because what else do you do?
no, that's 100% correct. So the um, the campuses like Columbia, Cornell, all the Ivy Leagues, they've had like a year and a half to deal with or have planning for the things that are continuing to go on, and yet they're not doing anything about anything. Again, is that a planned laissez-faire attitude from the powers that be on these university campuses?
They hate Israel. These administrators are very similar to the faculty members, overwhelmingly. Obviously, there are exceptions. Obviously, there are great people, and we work with those people. Those are our sources. A lot of them have to fake it. One of the most amazing things that we came across when we started our group was seeing people who are decent people who abhor anti-Semitism, who abhor, anti-American sentiment, death to America, and they came to us and they say, we want to give you information behind the scenes. We can
Wow.
never tell you our name, we can never tell you who we are, but we will give you good stuff. And so we get great stuff from great people like that, but they are in the minority.
I mean,
The
sadly,
administrations I believe CUNY is systemically anti-Semitic. I believe the chancellor is anti-Semitic. He hired Sally Abdallah, the care director. You can't hire someone like that. He knows exactly who she is. And he has come out in support of care. So is that an anti-Semitic person, the chancellor of my university? Yes.
that's unbelievable. So you spend a lot of time on this. Do you see a distinction between supporters of Hamas and supporters of the Palestinians?
Of course. Of course. I mean, if you are first of all, let me point out that tons of my students are Palestinian students. At Kingsborough Community College, where I work and I've taught for 20 years, I have never had one incident, not one, in 20 years
Wow.
with a Palestinian student. And it's an enormous percentage at Kingsborough of Palestinian students. I love them. They're just like anybody else. It's not the majority of people who are coming out and marching and doing encampments and those things. The majority of students, the majority of Palestinian students, they come into their class. They're lovely people. I get along great with them. We joke like anybody else. They're just people.
I
They want
guess
to live their life.
my question, I guess, to even drill down deeper, wasn't necessarily for the Palestinian students on campus. Of course, Americanized. Yeah, of course, there's a difference. I was thinking more, people when they're protesting are looking at Palestinians in Palestine, and they're talking about, free Palestine. If you're looking at the Palestinians in Palestine, do you see a clear-cut distinction between Hamas supporters and just rank and file Palestinians?
I do. I think Palestinians are victims in Palestine. And I don't say that shyly. I say that proudly and loudly. The Palestinian, first of all, a lot of my students are straight from Palestine. They come here from Palestine. We do get students like that. They are absolute, but the question is, we have to be honest about why they are victims. Who is making them victims? Is Israel targeting civilians? No. They go. I was recently in Israel and we visited. I actually don't want to say where we visited, but it was a military related place, and they were telling us the measures they go to protect Palestinian civilians. It is actually unbelievable when you actually see what they do to avoid killing Palestinians. Now, is it horrible that Palestinians die? Of course, they're human beings. Palestinian civilians should not be dying. They are absolutely victims and they live horrible lives. And a 5-year-old Palestinian boy, what chance does he have in life? He's taught to hate Jews from day one. He's
Right.
taught to kill Jews from day one. the question really is not whether they're victims or whether I support Palestinians. I fully support Palestinian civilians. But the question is, who is making them a victim? Is it Hamas or is it Israel? And if you're being honest about the situation, there is one terrorist group among those two, one who hides behind civilians, who hides weapons behind civilians, who puts weapons in hospitals, who hide in hospitals, and who actually try to increase martyrdom, increase the deaths of civilians.
Absolutely.
And then the other side, which at all costs tries to drops leaflets on Palestinian civilians. Get out of there. We're going to attack. Sends them sends Palestinian
100%.
civilians text messages. Get out of there. So we have to be honest about who's making Palestinians the victims. And the answer is Hamas.
So, you talked about how, you have a 5-year-old Palestinian boy, and he's taught from as soon as he can understand that Jews are the infidel and that they should die.
Right.
They learn in madrasas, and, there are madrasas in America. So, do you believe that kind of teaching is going on here?
Well, someone like Linda Sarsour, for example, who supports Sharia law, which is abhorrent. You may have seen, there was a recent video that went viral of a Queers for Palestine group. And there was a woman in the protest, a Muslim woman, who was cursing out the gay person who wanted to join the Palestinian protest. I ask you, is there a stupider person on earth, Michael, than a Queer for Palestine person?
Well, that's the definition of a useful idiot.
I mean,
when they would be the first ones thrown off a roof.
That's right. They have no rights in Palestine.
Of course.
They are killed. They are killed. If you are gay, by the way, there are hundreds of LGBTQ Palestinians who escape to Israel every year. Israel, not to Egypt, because it's not much better there either, or any other Arab country. They escape to Israel. The best thing that could happen to a Gazan who is gay is to escape to Israel. And that should tell you a lot.
Of course. So, I believe we're getting close on time, but, they talk, or now, under this new administration where, we're actually tackling some of the issues that are going on college campuses, including defunding, all of the monetary pain that they can inflict on a Columbia, on a Princeton, on a Cornell. But isn't with the kind of money they have and with the kind of backing that they get from non-government sources, is that really inflicting the kind of monetary pain that's going to make them change their way?
Oh, yeah. It's having an impact already. I mean, I think one of the Ivy Leagues had to take out a loan to cover some of their grants. That's a big problem for them. That is not a little problem. It is, to your point, it's not the only thing we should be doing. We should also be looking at Qatar in terms of government support from outside governments, from foreign governments.
Right.
Definitely. And also internal, the George Soros type groups that are funding so many of these protests, a lot of it hidden behind the scenes, dark money. Need to look at all that stuff. But yeah, absolutely.
So one of the most overused words on TV that I can't stand is accountability. Will somebody be held accountable? And nobody typically ever is for anything, for the most part. So Katrina Armstrong was in front of a congressional committee yesterday and pleaded stupid. And, then the trustees of the university issued some bullshit, empty rhetoric, the typical crap that means nothing and goes nowhere. So how do you build accountability? If it's as you say that anti-Semitism is inherently built into the administrations of many colleges, then how is anyone ever held accountable?
Well, she is stupid. And to me, the worst combination of traits a person can have is stupid and evil. That is the most dangerous combination that a person can have. And there are so many of these people out there, the leaders of the Ivy Leagues, who are stupid and also evil, also anti-Semitic, also anti-American, also Marxist, which means they haven't learned a thing from history. So I don't know what they're teaching in their schools. But there was an article that came out recently, which is unbelievable to me, that Harvard, which by the way, I think got hit the hardest with the federal
I saw that.
grants, $8 billion. How is Harvard getting $8 billion?
Right.
And they took away, they have now implemented remedial math,
Which is
math
just
at
beyond.
Harvard.
Right. I mean,
That
that's
tells you something, right? That tells you that,
100%.
what does it tell you? It tells you that Harvard's agenda is not what it was when I was Harvard age. Not that I
100%.
went to Harvard, but that when I was college age.
When I went to SUNY Albany.
So it
Right.
tells you that their agenda is very different. They're trying to accomplish something else. So we need to get to the bottom of what that something else is. And I think I know part of it, and I think other people know the rest of it.
So finally, I read an article yesterday that the Department of Homeland Security is going to be starting to screen the social media accounts, searching for anti-Semitic postings in an effort to potentially be pulling visas or denying visas. So, I think that, I guess it's not so much a question as a statement. I think under this new administration, we have a decent shot of pushing the envelope as far as it can possibly be pushed, because the last administration, it was purely a political expedience and nothing to do with any real standing for anything. So I mean, what's your, I guess that is more of a statement than a question. But, going forward,
Okay.
You'll keep doing what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
and what else can you do?
Well, I think also though, keep in mind, Trump is only president for 4 years.
Right.
And I don't think there's any person, Republican or Democrat, that is going to continue the kind of things that he's doing, which are so powerful. I mean, regardless of what you think of them, like them, don't like them, he has made powerful moves. And I don't see anybody having the guts to do that on either side of the aisle. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't see that. The thing that really scares me is the Tucker Carlsons of the world. The Tucker Carlson is trying to change the Republican Party. If he's successful, and to make it anti-Semitic, I mean, he actually said yesterday in a quote, and I made a video about this, that anybody who supports a conflict with Iran, any conflict, not a war, any conflict, so even taking out their nuclear reactors, is an enemy, not an ally of the United States. He called them an enemy of the United States. So anybody who opposes possibly America's biggest enemy, which is Iran and China, is an enemy of the United States if you want their nuclear reactor, their nuclear program taken down, or you want any kind of a conflict stopped. So Israel, who is literally in harm's way of being taken out permanently forever, a permanent Holocaust, Iran has said they want to do that.
Of course.
How many times has Iran announced they're going to do that? So Israel, by taking a position that we oppose that we're going to fight for ourselves against Iran and maybe work with America with intelligence or anything else, Tucker considers Israel to be an enemy of the United States. It scares the hell out of me,
Now,
Michael, that
why
this is the future of the Republican Party. That's scary.
why does he have that position?
He's an anti-Semite. He's an anti-Semite. And I was a fan of Tucker Carlson for many years. I watched all his shows. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was a critical thinker. So when I started seeing the types of content he was putting out once he was kicked off Fox News, and by the way, I have a feeling it had something to do with some of these views that he's expressing, just a feeling. But when I saw what he was putting out there, I started to be like, what in the world is going on here? If this happens, if he actually succeeds in taking over he wants to make the Republican Party Thomas Massey. Look up Thomas Massey for those of you, your listeners who may not know him. Basically hate Jews, hate Israel, for no reason other than that we're Jews. So that cannot happen. And Tucker Carlson is a big threat. He really is. It scares me.
You know what? I wasn't necessarily aware of that, so thank you. I appreciate
Like, look
it.
it up. Look up his videos.
So now, if
Look what he
somebody,
said just 2 days ago.
I will as soon as we're done. But the last thing is, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, whether it's a lawyer who wanted to become part of your team, or someone who just had a question, or how would they do that? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram, CUNY_prof, CUNY_prof, and my group is Safe Campus. So on X, it is _Safe Campus. On Instagram, it is safe.campus. And we have a website, mysafecampus.org. On our website, if you need legal help, just go to mysafecampus.org. You can find the legal help section. And if you're a lawyer, we need lawyers. We want to get 1,000 lawyers. That's our goal. You can sign up on there if you want to be a lawyer in our program. We invite you, we welcome you, and we love you and appreciate you.
Of any specific genre or any kind of lawyer?
Any lawyer who feels comfortable taking a case that might possibly relate to anti-Semitism. You can always turn down a case if it's not your area, but that's a good question, Michael. And anybody who feels they might potentially be able to take a certain type of case related to whether it could be an assault against the Jew, whether it's discrimination, anything related to that.
Terrific. Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully you'll come back on sometime in the future and we'll talk about how peaches and cream the world has become.
I appreciate it, Michael. I hope so.
I hope so too.
Happy Passover.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop us a review. We'll be back soon with more insights, experts, and conversations that make you think. See you next time. Do you ever wonder where curiosity meets conversation?